All right, we are working to create a piece of art that recycles or uses our figurative gesture sketches in such a way that we don't lose the quality of the gesture. So here I have an example. It actually made this in my first hour class today when students asked the question, what do you mean experiment and play with art supplies in your sketchbook? And so I took a gesture drawing that I didn't care for, that I wasn't intending to use as a part of my project, and I played around with how I could make artwork utilizing that sketch, and this is what I came up with. Now, I didn't like the sketch, and I do really like what I made using a sketch that I thought was trash. So I'm going to show you how to experiment with art supplies. So here I have a sheet of paper you can see out of my sketchbook. This side is still a little wet, so I'm going to go ahead and use the other half. And what I'm going to do to start with is I'm just going to kind of gather some supplies. I have some scraps that I used from before. I have my supply kit here handy. And I am going to kind of explore some supplies, right? I'm going to explore some supplies. So maybe I decide I'm going to use this sketch this time. It's another one that I don't really care for. I don't really care for either of the ones on the back as well. And so I am going to begin by cutting this out. One thing that I can see right away is apparently I ran out of time. And this is primarily vine charcoal. Now, vine charcoal, remember, let's get this off of here first, will just brush away. So what I'm going to do first, before using this, so I'm going to get some of the rest of this stuff out of my way, is before, just sort of before experimenting even, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this sketch, and maybe if I wanted, I could find the video again, but what I'm going to do is just take a minute to just sort of draw over the top, add this like charcoal pencil line that's here on part of it, and just have this happen all over. Because then what I have is something that isn't going to brush away as easily. Now, without a lot of practice, you're going to have to like probably go back and find the day that this was done. It makes me wish that we had dated these so that maybe I could look at this drawing again. But this, remember, is for practice in my sketchbook, so it doesn't really matter. So just even me adding that line on, I kind of like this better. And now I know at least that outline isn't going to like smear away into nothingness for me as I play around with this guy. So when I tell you to play with art supplies or experiment in your sketchbook, I am literally telling you to play around with art supplies and experiment in your sketchbook. So what that means is I'm taking a sheet in my book and I'm gathering my supplies and I'm just going to explore. I'm going to explore the types of marks those supplies make. I'm going to explore options for potentially for making a project. And I'm just kind of like making note of what works and what doesn't work. So I have this now. Part of me thinks that it might be cool to color in some spaces. So I am going to look for my color supplies that I have in my kit, and I happen to have colored pencils and these crayons. I think I'm going to start with the crayons. And part of how I'm going to explore as well is I'm going to come over here on this sheet and I'm going to just do some exploration just with the crayons themselves, right? They obviously draw like crayons. I'm trying to see if they blend, like will the colors smear into each other? The colors do kind of smear into each other. They don't smear very far on the paper though, so they kind of stay where you put them. The other part with these crayons, remember, was that they turned into paint. Trying to see if I have a little bit of water here and a paintbrush, so I can take my paintbrush, and with just a little bit of water, I should be able to move some of this paint. Now remember, this sketchbook paper kind of hates the water. The paper that you have for your project is more accepting of water. It is a heavier sheet of paper. So at some point I could have to experiment with some of the supplies on the back side of this sheet because this stuff really, like I said, is kind of grouchy about color. So maybe what I decide to do is just go ahead and I'm going to play with some shapes. I remember from the examples in the PowerPoint that there were some that had like big shapes of color, and I kind of like that idea. So maybe I explore making big shapes of color in my project. So I'm just going to make a giant yellow stripe on this piece of paper. Then maybe I can experiment with, does this blend together? Oh yeah, look at that. That's nice. That makes the marks go away and smooths it out so it doesn't look so crayony. And now I'm going to kind of play with my figure again over here. Like, what does that look like? Maybe I find some, like, junk mail is fantastic for this project. And so maybe I find an old magazine that my parents, my family says that I can use. Oh, this one is super boring. Except I see some of these colors. I like that idea. I've got this big square, and maybe now I play around with some other shapes using these other materials. So maybe I just mess around with what does it look like if I cut them into different little size stripes. And think about including those in, should have taken the tops off, in my project, right? What does that look like? Oh, that's kind of exciting. I like that it's the primary colors. I like that I can play around with maybe experimenting with some plaid. But you can see this is not my project yet. This is me just playing with materials. So when I tell you to play with materials, this is what I'm telling you to do. I'm telling you to experiment. I'm telling you to find what you have, whether that is from your kit or something that you can find at your place. And I'm telling you to sort of explore what does it mean to play with those materials. So the biggest thing is to kind of have fun. Like I said, I'm doing this just straight in my sketchbook at this point because I still don't really know exactly what I want to do for my project. But you can see that I'm just kind of playing around with some choices, playing around with some options. And having some fun. And this is what I'm going to continue to do. As I'm doing this now as well, I'm thinking ahead to my project. I'm thinking, oh, what parts do I like? What parts do I not like? What's working? What's not working? And these are the questions that I'm going to ask myself as I'm working. So you can see this beginning has a really different feel from the one that I did during first hour. I used a lot more charcoal. I experimented with that. I used some of my dictionary page. And this one's gonna feel really different, but it's really different and still matches the assignment. So make sure that you're playing, make sure that you're exploring, make sure that you are maybe doing a practice round with sketches that you don't like. So remember, this was a sketch that I didn't care for. This was a sketch that I was telling myself was going in the trash. And now as I'm playing with it, I'm seeing that, you know, maybe it has a little bit more potential than I thought. So make sure that you, when I say play, this is what I'm talking about.